The gun went off 3 seconds before the car flipped. Lena Walsh saw the muzzle flash in the side mirror, heard the rear window explode, felt the vehicle swerve hard right as her boss yanked the wheel. Then gravity disappeared. The world rotated in slow motion, metal screeching, glass raining down like hail. Her shoulder slammed into the door. Her head cracked against something hard. The seatbelt cut into her ribs so tight she couldn't breathe. When the spinning stopped, they were upside down, suspended in a forest ravine 30 feet below the mountain road. Smoke poured from the hood. The acrid smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled her nose. Blood dripped from somewhere above her eyebrow, warm and sticky, tracking down into her hairline. Her boss hung beside her in the driver's seat, unconscious, his white dress shirt soaked red across the left shoulder. The gun that had fallen from his jacket during the crash lay on the roof of the car, which was now the floor, 3 inches from her face. Lena had worked for James Kong for 11 months. In that time, she'd seen him smile exactly twice. Both times had been for clients, and both times the smile hadn't reached his eyes. He ran an import company in Seattle, or that's what the tax document said, and she processed invoices and managed his calendar and took his coffee order without cream or sugar every morning at 7:15. He paid her $70,000 a year, which was $30,000 more than her last job, and he never said please or thank you or good morning. He just expected perfection, and when she delivered it, he'd nod once and turn back to his computer screen. She'd planned to quit in February. Save enough to cover 3 months of rent, update her resume, and walk out without looking back. That was before the gun, before the men shooting at them on a mountain road 2 hours outside the city, before she realized her boss wasn't just cold and demanding. He was something else entirely. The gasoline smell got stronger. Lena fumbled with her seatbelt, fingers shaking, and finally the buckle released. She dropped onto the crumpled roof with a grunt, her ankle twisting under her weight. Pain shot up her leg but she bit down on her tongue and crawled toward the shattered window. Behind her, James Kong made a sound, low and rough, like gravel scraping concrete. She stopped. Turned back. His eyes were open now, dark and unfocused, blood running from his temple down into his black hair. He tried to reach for his seatbelt and his arm wouldn't cooperate. His breathing came shallow and fast. Lena could have kept crawling. Could have climbed out the window, scrambled up the ravine, flagged down a car on the road above. Let him figure out his own mess. Instead, she crawled back, reached up, and hit the seatbelt release. He fell hard onto the roof beside her, and the impact made him suck in air through his teeth. His hand went to his shoulder where the blood was spreading, and when he pulled his fingers away they were slick and red. "Can you move?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. He nodded. Tried to sit up. Failed on the first attempt, succeeded on the second. His eyes tracked to the gun on the roof, then to her face. For 3 seconds neither of them spoke. Then he said, "We need to go. Now." Who were those people? Later. No. Not later. Right now. Who the hell were they and why were they shooting at us? James Kong looked at her like he was calculating something. Risk assessment. Damage control. Whatever algorithm ran behind those cold eyes when he decided whether an employee was useful or disposable. Finally he said, "Business competitors. Business competitors don't use automatic weapons. Mine do." If you're enjoying this story, hit the subscribe button for more like this. The car made a groaning sound. Metal shifting. The smell of gasoline got so thick Lena could taste it on her tongue, sweet and poisonous. James grabbed the gun, shoved it into the back of his belt, and started crawling toward the window. His left arm hung useless at his side but he moved fast, efficient, like he'd done this before. Lena followed because staying in a leaking car that might explode seemed stupider than following a man who just admitted to having enemies with machine guns. They made it 15 feet from the wreck before the car caught fire. Not an explosion, just a soft whoosh as the flames took hold, orange light flooding the darkening forest. James kept moving, one hand pressed to his shoulder, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the wet leaves and moss. Lena's ankle screamed with every step, but she matched his pace, and when he stumbled she caught his good arm and kept him upright. They walked for 20 minutes before he finally stopped. Leaned against a tree trunk, his breathing labored, his face pale under the blood and dirt. The forest had gone quiet except for the distant sound of water running over rocks. No road noise. No voices. Just wilderness stretching in every direction, thick with Douglas fir and western red cedar, the ground a carpet of ferns and deadfall. Lena's phone was gone. Lost in the crash or shattered. She checked her pockets twice anyway, knowing it was pointless. James pulled out his phone with his good hand, looked at the spiderweb of cracks across the screen, pressed the power button. Nothing. He threw it into the undergrowth without a word. So, Lena said. Business competitors. He didn't answer. The kind of business that involves guns and car chases and bleeding in the woods. Still nothing. I process your invoices, James. I've seen the numbers. Shipping containers from Busan, manifests for electronics and textiles. All very legitimate. Except 6 months ago I noticed the weight ratios were off. A container listed at 12 tons that should have been closer to 8 based on the declared contents. I thought it was a clerical error. His eyes cut to her, sharp despite the pain. You didn't say anything. I needed the job. And now? Now I'm stuck in the woods with a man who just got shot at by business competitors, so I think the job situation has changed. For the first time in 11 months, James Kong almost smiled. It was brief, more of a twitch at the corner of his mouth, gone before it fully formed. Then he said, I run shipments for an organization. The containers are clean on paper. What's inside them isn't always electronics. What is it? Does it matter? To me? Yes. He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Not his assistant. Not the woman who brought him coffee. A person who was currently keeping him from bleeding out in the woods. Pharmaceuticals. The kind you can't buy at Walgreens. You're a drug dealer. I'm logistics. That's the same thing. No. A dealer stands on a corner. I make sure product moves from point A to point B without law enforcement noticing. Lena sat down on a fallen log because her ankle couldn't take her weight anymore and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd spent 11 months working for a criminal. Processing invoices for drug shipments. Scheduling meetings that were probably about territory and supply chains and things that got people killed. She thought about her apartment, her student loans, her mother's medical bills that she'd been chipping away at with that $70,000 salary. All of it paid for with drug money. James was watching her. You can go. Head west. You'll hit a road eventually. And leave you here to bleed out? I've had worse. That's not reassuring. It's realistic. She looked at him, really looked. His shoulder was still bleeding, soaking through his shirt, dripping onto the ground. His face had gone from pale to gray. He was leaning heavy against the tree like it was the only thing keeping him vertical. If she left him here, he'd be dead by morning. Maybe sooner. Take your shirt off, she said. What? Your shirt. Take it off. I need to see how bad it is. Lena. Do you want to die in the woods or do you want me to help you? Because those are your options. He unbuttoned the shirt with his right hand, slowly, his jaw tight. When he peeled it away from his shoulder, the wound underneath was worse than she'd expected. Not a graze. A through and through, the entry wound in front just below his collarbone, the exit wound in back tearing through muscle. Blood welled up fresh with every heartbeat. Lena tore the shirt into strips. Used the cleanest section to pack the wound, pressing hard enough that he made a sound low in his throat but didn't pull away. She tied another strip around his shoulder to hold the packing in place, then used a third to make a sling for his arm. Field medicine from a 2-hour workplace first aid course she'd taken 3 years ago. It wouldn't save him, not really, but it might keep him alive long enough to find help. When she finished, he was looking at her again with that calculating expression. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Why did you?" "Because I'm not the kind of person who lets someone die in the woods. Even if they are a drug dealer." Logistics. Right. Logistics. Night was coming fast. The temperature had already dropped 10 degrees and would drop another 20 before dawn. Neither of them had jackets. Lena was wearing a pencil skirt and a blouse that was now torn and filthy. James had nothing but his dress pants and the ruined sling. They needed fire, shelter, water, food. All the things she had zero experience finding in the wilderness. James pushed away from the tree. Swayed. Caught himself. "There's a stream downhill. We need water." "You need to sit down." "I need water or I'll pass out." "Pick one." They found the stream 15 minutes later, both of them half sliding down the slope, grabbing at branches and roots to keep from falling. The water was ice cold and tasted like minerals and moss. Lena cupped her hands and drank until her stomach hurt, then helped James do the same. He was shaking now, his skin clammy, shock setting in despite the makeshift bandage. She found a spot where 2 fallen trees formed a rough shelter, thick with ferns and shielded from the wind. Got him settled with his back against one of the trunks. His eyes kept sliding closed and she'd shake his good shoulder until they opened again. "Stay awake. Trying. Try harder. Bossy. You're delirious." "Not yet." She gathered dead branches and dry moss, arranged them in a pile, and tried to remember everything she'd ever seen in movies about starting fires. Friction. Sparks. Flint and steel. She had none of those things. Just sticks and hope. She rubbed 2 pieces of wood together until her palms blistered and nothing happened except her arms got tired. James was watching her with half-closed eyes. "My pocket." "What?" "Right pocket. Inside." She reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a lighter. "Expensive. Silver. Engraved with initials she couldn't read in the fading light." "You had this the whole time?" "Forgot." "You forgot." "Blood loss." She lit the fire. It caught on the 3rd try, small flames licking at the moss, spreading to the larger branches. Heat and light pushed back the darkness. She fed it carefully, building it up until the warmth reached where James sat slumped against the tree. His eyes closed and this time she let them. His breathing evened out. Not good, but better than before. Lena sat on the other side of the fire and hugged her knees to her chest. Her ankle throbbed. Her head ached where she'd hit it in the crash. Dried blood crusted her hairline. She was cold and hungry and lost in the woods with a man she'd hated for 11 months, a man who turned out to be a criminal, a man who was currently bleeding and unconscious and completely dependent on her to keep him alive. She should have left him. Should have climbed that ravine and never looked back. Instead, she was feeding sticks to a fire and watching his chest rise and fall and wondering why the thought of him dying made her hands shake worse than the fear or the cold. The night stretched on. She didn't sleep. Every sound in the darkness could have been an animal or one of those men with guns finding them. She kept the fire going, kept checking that James was still breathing, kept telling herself that rescue would come in the morning. Someone would find the crash site. Send search teams. They just had to survive until dawn. When the sun finally came up, weak gray light filtering through the canopy, James opened his eyes. He looked at her across the dying fire and said, "You're still here. Where else would I be?" "Gone." Smart people would be gone. Then I guess I'm not smart. He tried to sit up. Made it halfway before the pain stopped him. Lena crossed to his side, helped him adjust his position so he could lean back without putting pressure on the wound. His skin was hot now. Fever setting in. The bandage was soaked through, dark red and stiff. "We need to move," he said. "You need a hospital." "Can't. Those men will be watching the hospitals. Then you'll die." "Not today." He said it with such certainty that she almost believed him. Almost. But his hands were shaking and his eyes weren't quite focused, and when he tried to stand he made it 3 feet before his legs gave out. Lena caught him before he hit the ground, her small frame somehow supporting his weight, and eased him back down. "Listen to me." Her voice came out harder than she intended. "You are not walking anywhere. You're barely conscious. That wound is infected. If we don't get you help, you will die in these woods and I'll have to bury you, and I didn't sign up for that when I took your job offer." "You signed up to process invoices." "Exactly. Invoices. Not wilderness survival with a bleeding crime lord." "I'm not a crime lord." "What are you then?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm someone who made choices. Bad ones. Starting when I was 16 and my father died owing money to the wrong people. They gave me options. Work for them or watch my mother lose everything. So I worked. Ran errands. Moved packages. Got good at it. 10 years later I'm running the entire Pacific Northwest logistics operation, and I can't remember the last time I made a choice that wasn't dictated by someone above me or the business or the territory. That's not an excuse. I know. It doesn't make it okay. I know that too." Lena sat back on her heels. Looked at this man who'd been nothing but ice and efficiency for 11 months, who was now bleeding and feverish and more honest than he'd ever been in the office. "Why did you make me come on this trip?" "Needed someone to take notes during the meeting." "That's not true. You never take notes. You remember everything." He was quiet. "Then, you're right. I wanted you there." "Why?" "Because you're real. Everyone else in that world, they're playing angles. Watching their backs. You just show up and do the work and go home. You don't ask questions. You don't want anything except your paycheck. It's..." He trailed off, wincing as another wave of pain hit. "It's what?" "It's the only normal thing in my life." Something in her chest twisted. She looked away, focused on the fire, on anything except the way his words made her see him differently. 11 months of hating him, and now she was sitting in the woods learning that his coldness wasn't cruelty. It was exhaustion. A man who'd been playing a role so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. "We still need to move," James said. "Even if I can't walk far. Staying here is worse." "Why?" "Because those men won't give up. They'll search the crash site, track us from there. We've got maybe 6 hours before they find us." Lena's stomach dropped. 6 hours. Maybe less. She stood up. Looked around the forest. Trees in every direction. No trail. No landmarks. Just endless wilderness that could hide them or kill them, and she had no idea which. "Which way?" "North. There's a cabin about 8 miles from here. Hunting shelter. If we can reach it, we can hole up until I'm strong enough to call for extraction." 8 miles. You can do it. Can you? He didn't answer. Just held out his good hand. She pulled him to his feet and he stood there swaying, his face white, his jaw set. Then he took one step. Another. A third. Each one slower than the last, but he kept moving. They walked for 3 hours. Maybe 4. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the next tree, the next rise, the next 100 feet of ground. James fell twice. Both times Lena got him back up, her shoulder under his good arm, her legs burning with the effort of keeping them both upright. Her ankle had gone from painful to numb. She didn't think about it. Didn't think about the hunger or the thirst or the fact that they were leaving a blood trail anyone could follow. The cabin appeared around noon, a small structure of weathered logs with a rusted tin roof and a door hanging crooked on its hinges. James made it to the steps before he collapsed. Lena dragged him inside, every muscle screaming, and got him onto the single cot against the far wall. The cabin was one room. No electricity. No running water. But there was a wood stove and a stack of dry logs and a shelf with 3 cans of beans and a can opener. She checked his wound. The bleeding had slowed, but the skin around it was hot and red. Infection spreading. She needed antibiotics. Clean water. Actual medical supplies. She had none of those things. Just her hands and desperation. James grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak but his eyes were clear. If they find us, you run. Don't look back. Just run. I'm not leaving you. Lena. I didn't carry you 8 miles to leave you now. So stop talking and save your strength. She opened one of the bean cans and made him eat. He managed 4 spoonfuls before he couldn't keep his eyes open anymore. She ate the rest, cold and tasteless, then went outside to gather more firewood. The forest was silent. No birds. No wind. Just the oppressive quiet that meant something was wrong. She saw them through the trees. 3 men. Moving slow. Methodical. Searching. One of them had a rifle. Another carried something that looked like a radio. The third was following a trail on the ground, his eyes down, reading the disturbed leaves and broken branches like a book. Lena backed toward the cabin. Slowly. Don't run. Don't make noise. Her hand found the door frame and she slipped inside. James was awake, already pulling the gun from where he'd set it on the floor beside the cot. His hand shook but the gun didn't waver when he pointed it at the door. How many? He whispered. 3. Can you shoot? I've never held a gun. Today you learn. He tried to stand. Couldn't. Fell back onto the cot with a sound that was half grunt, half laugh. Okay. New plan. You hide. I'll handle it. You can barely sit up. I've got 5 bullets and decent aim. That's enough. James. Please. He looked at her and for the first time since the crash there was something other than calculation in his eyes. Something that looked almost like fear. Please just hide. Lena took the gun from his hand. It was heavier than she expected. Cold metal. Serious weight. She checked it like she'd seen in movies, found 5 bullets like he'd said, clicked the safety off because there had to be a safety and the little switch seemed like the obvious choice. You're insane, James said. You're delirious. I'm just desperate. She moved to the window. Cracked it open an inch. The men were closer now. 50 feet. 40. The one with the radio said something she couldn't hear. The one tracking them pointed at the cabin. They knew. Lena's hands stopped shaking. Everything stopped. The fear, the pain, the exhaustion. There was just the gun and the men and the knowledge that if she did nothing, they'd both die. She aimed at the closest man. Exhaled. Squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked harder than she expected. The shot went wide, bark exploding off a tree to the left of her target. But it was enough. The men scattered, diving for cover, and James was yelling something from the cot but she couldn't hear him over the blood rushing in her ears. She fired again. Again. One shot hit a man in the leg and he went down screaming. Another hit the radio, sparks and plastic flying. Then the rifle answered. Wood splintered above her head. Glass shattered. She dropped below the window, pressed her back against the wall, the gun hot in her hands. 2 bullets left. 3 men, 1 injured. The math wasn't good. James had dragged himself off the cot. He was on the floor, crawling toward her, his face a mask of pain and determination. When he reached her side he took the gun, checked the remaining bullets, and looked at her like he was memorizing her face. When I start shooting, you run out the back. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run. We already had this conversation. Lena. No. She grabbed his face with both hands. Made him look at her. I'm not leaving. So either we both die or we both live. Pick one. Outside, boots on the cabin steps. The door rattled. Someone testing the lock. James raised the gun, his hand steadier now, and fired through the door. A body hit the porch. The other men opened fire, bullets punching through the thin walls, dust and splinters filling the air. Lena covered her head. James fired the last bullet and the shooting stopped. Silence. Thick and terrible. Then footsteps running away through the forest. Retreat or regroup, she couldn't tell. James slumped against the wall, the gun falling from his fingers. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You hired me. Worst decision of my life. You're welcome. He laughed. Actually laughed. It was rough and pained and cut off halfway by a cough, but it was real. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. Lena caught him before his head hit the floor, checked his pulse, found it weak but steady. The wound had opened again during the fight, blood spreading across the makeshift bandage. She pressed her hands over it, applying pressure, trying to slow the bleeding, knowing it wasn't enough. A sound outside. Different from before. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Getting louder. She looked through the shattered window and saw the helicopter cresting the ridge, black with no markings, hovering above the trees. A rope dropped. Men in tactical gear descended fast and efficient. For 3 seconds she thought they were more attackers. Then one of them called out, James Kong. Stand down. We're extraction. They moved like professionals. 2 men secured the perimeter. A third entered the cabin, assessed James with clinical detachment, started field treatment. A fourth talked into a radio. The fifth looked at Lena and said, You his assistant? I was. Not anymore. I don't know what I am anymore. The medic got an 4 into James's good arm, administered something that made his breathing even out, wrapped the wound properly. They lifted him onto a stretcher and carried him to the helicopter like he weighed nothing. One of the men held out his hand to Lena. You coming? She looked back at the cabin. At the bullet holes and broken glass and the blood on the floor. At the forest stretching endlessly in every direction. Then she looked at James, unconscious on the stretcher, and realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it when she didn't leave him in the ravine. Made it again when she didn't let him die in the woods. Made it a third time when she picked up that gun. She took the man's hand. Let him pull her into the helicopter. They lifted off, the cabin shrinking below them, the forest a green carpet marked by the crashed car and the men they'd left behind. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Someone else handed her water. She drank it mechanically, tasting nothing, her eyes on James. The flight took 40 minutes. They landed on a private airstrip outside Seattle where an ambulance was waiting. James was loaded inside, still unconscious, and the medic looked at Lena. You should get checked too. Possible concussion. That ankle needs an X-ray. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're in shock. Maybe she was. Her hands had started shaking again. Her vision kept going blurry at the edges. But she followed the ambulance to the hospital anyway, a private facility that didn't ask questions, and sat in the waiting room while they took James into surgery. 2 hours later a doctor emerged and said the word successful and stable and lucky. Another inch to the right and the bullet would have hit the subclavian artery. He would have bled out in minutes. They let her see him that evening. He was awake, groggy from anesthesia, his shoulder wrapped in proper bandages and his arm in a real sling. When he saw her in the doorway his eyes focused and he said, "You're still here. Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Normal life? Away from all this?" She sat in the chair beside his bed. Looked at him properly for the first time since the crash. No blood. No dirt. Just a man who looked exhausted and human and nothing like the cold boss who'd never said thank you. "I shot someone today." "I know. I've never done that before. I hope you never have to do it again." "Me too." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, those men who came with the helicopter. Who are they?" "My people. The organization. They knew where to find us. I activated a tracker before we left Seattle. Standard procedure for high-risk meetings. When the car crashed, the signal stopped moving. They sent the team. So we were never really alone." "No. You let me think we were going to die. I thought we might. The tracker doesn't mean much if I'm dead before they arrive." Lena looked at her hands. They were bandaged now, blisters from starting the fire wrapped in clean white gauze. "What happens now?" "Now you go home. I pay you severance. 6 months' salary. Enough to cover anything you need while you find a new job. We never see each other again." "That's it? That's the smart play. What if I don't want the smart play?" James turned his head to look at her fully. "Lena. You can't work for me anymore. Not after this. Those men knew I was going to that meeting. Someone in the organization leaked my location. That means I've got a traitor in my operation and until I find them, everyone around me is a target. Including you. So fire me. I'll find another job. But that doesn't mean we never see each other again." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I just spent 2 days keeping you alive in the woods. I'm saying I shot someone for you. I'm saying that somewhere between hating you and saving you, something changed. And I think you know it too." He was quiet for a long time. "Then, I spent 11 months pushing you away. Being cold. Making you hate me. You want to know why?" "Why?" "Because I knew if I let myself see you as anything other than my assistant, I'd want things I can't have. A normal life. A person who looks at me like I'm not a criminal. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am." He closed his eyes. "And I was right. Because now I can't stop thinking about how you stayed. How you didn't leave me. How you picked up that gun even though you were terrified. And I know the right thing is to let you go. Send you back to your life. But I don't want to." Lena reached out. Put her hand over his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "Then don't. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You just spent 2 days nearly dying. I spent 2 days keeping you alive. Everything else can wait." A knock on the door interrupted them. A man in a dark suit entered without waiting for permission. He looked at James, then at Lena, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." "About the leak." James's hand tightened on hers. "Give us a minute. This can't wait." "I said give us a minute." The man looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he stepped back into the hall and closed the door. James turned to Lena. "Last chance. You can walk away. No one will blame you." "I'm not walking away." It's dangerous. I know. People in my life get hurt. I noticed. Lena. James. She leaned closer. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking if you meant what you said. About wanting things you can't have. Because if you meant it, then it's not about can or can't. It's about will you or won't you. He looked at her like he was standing on the edge of something, calculating one last time whether to jump. Then he pulled her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles, and said, I will. The door opened again. The man in the suit looked impatient. Boss. We've got movement on the South Docks. If the leak knows you're alive, they'll make another move soon. James sat up despite the pain, his jaw set, the cold efficiency sliding back into place. But his hand stayed wrapped around Lena's. Then we move first. Get me a secure phone. I'm done hiding. You just got out of surgery. I've got work to do. James discharged himself 2 hours later against medical advice. The doctor protested, but James signed the papers with his good hand and walked out with Lena beside him. A black SUV waited at the curb. The man in the suit, who'd introduced himself as Eric Dalton, drove them to a warehouse on the industrial waterfront. Inside, 6 men waited around a table covered with laptops and surveillance photos. James sat down carefully, his face pale but his voice steady. Talk. One of the men, younger with nervous energy, pulled up security footage on a laptop. The leak came from inside. Someone accessed your schedule 3 days before the mountain meeting. Sent it encrypted to an external server. We traced it to the South Docks. A shipping office we use for clean operations. Who has access to that office? 12 people. But only 3 had the encryption keys to send external messages. He pulled up 3 photos. Ben Harper. Sarah Kim. And Tony Rizzo. Lena leaned forward. She knew those names. Processed their invoices. Ben handled West Coast shipments. Sarah managed customs paperwork. Tony coordinated driver schedules. Tony was in the office last week asking about your travel plans. Said he needed to arrange backup drivers. James's jaw tightened. Where is he now? Eric checked his phone. His GPS tracker shows him at his apartment in Ballard. Send 2 teams. 1 to the apartment. 1 to his sister's place in Tacoma. He's got family he'll run to. James stood up despite the pain. I'm going to the apartment. Boss, you just got shot. Which is why I want to look him in the eye when we find him. They drove north in 3 vehicles. James and Lena in the lead SUV with Eric. 2 more cars behind them filled with armed men who moved with military precision. The apartment building was ordinary. Red brick. 6 floors. Fire escape on the side. They entered through the underground garage, took the stairs to the 4th floor, and stacked up outside apartment 4C. Eric knocked. Tony. It's Eric. Need to talk. Silence. Then scrambling sounds inside. A window opening. James nodded and 2 men broke off, heading for the fire escape. Eric kicked the door. It splintered on the second hit and they poured inside. Tony Rizzo was halfway out the window when the men on the fire escape grabbed him. They dragged him back inside, threw him on the couch. He was 40-something, thinning hair, fear making his eyes wild. James sat across from him. Lena stood by the door, watching. Who paid you? I don't know what you're talking about. Tony. I've known you 8 years. You're not a good liar. Who paid you? Nobody. I swear. Eric pulled out his phone, showed Tony a photo. Bank records. Transfers. $50,000 deposited 2 weeks ago in an offshore account under Tony's wife's maiden name. The Choi Syndicate. You sold us out to them. Tony's face crumbled. They said nobody would get hurt. Just information. They wanted to know your route, your security detail. Said they were planning a negotiation, wanted leverage. He looked at James. I didn't know they'd try to kill you. I swear I didn't know. 50,000. James's voice was flat. That's what my life costs. My daughter needs surgery. Insurance won't cover it. I had medical bills, I had debt, I had nowhere else to turn. You could have asked me. And say what? Your criminal enterprise doesn't pay enough for my sick kid? You think I don't know what happens to people who ask for help in this business? They become liabilities. James was quiet. Then he said, You're right. I built a system where loyalty is demanded but help isn't offered. Where people are afraid to ask for what they need. That's on me. He leaned forward. But you still sold me out. You nearly got me killed. And you definitely got Lena dragged into the wilderness to die. Tony looked at Lena. I'm sorry. I really am. Sorry doesn't fix it, she said quietly. James stood up. Eric. Transfer 200,000 to Tony's account. Make sure his daughter gets the surgery. Then put him on a plane to anywhere that isn't here. He's out of the organization. He contacts anyone, comes back to Seattle, even thinks about our business again, he's done. Understood? Tony stared. You're letting me go. I'm paying your daughter's medical bills and exiling you. It's more mercy than you gave me. Take it. They left Tony sitting on his couch, stunned and crying. In the car, Eric said, The Choi Syndicate will come after us again. They know you survived. Let them come. We'll be ready this time. James looked at Lena. And we'll see them coming because I'm done trusting the old systems. Time to rebuild. Better. Different. Back at the warehouse, James made calls. Restructured security. Changed protocols. Promoted people he trusted and retired ones he didn't. By 3 a.m. he was exhausted, his shoulder screaming, but the organization was locked down tight. No more leaks. No more betrayals. Lena had stayed through all of it, learning the business from the inside, asking questions, offering suggestions that surprised everyone because they were smart and practical and came from someone who saw the operation differently. When the last person left and it was just them in the empty warehouse, James turned to her. You're good at this. Logistics? Reading people. Finding problems. You'd make a hell of a strategist. Is that a job offer? It's whatever you want it to be. She walked to him. Put her hand on his chest, careful of his injured shoulder. I want it to be us. Not boss and employee. Not criminal and accomplice. Just us. He kissed her then. Soft at first, then deeper, his good arm wrapping around her waist. When they broke apart he said, just us. But fair warning, my life is complicated. I noticed. And dangerous. I shot someone yesterday. I'm aware. And I'm still a criminal. Working on that. You just showed mercy. That's progress. He laughed. You're going to reform me, aren't you? Somebody has to. They left the warehouse as the sun came up over Seattle. The city stretched below them, buildings catching gold light, the water in the distance reflecting the sky. James drove them to his apartment, a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimal furniture. Everything clean lines and empty space. A place to sleep, not a home. Lena stood at the window, looking out at the water. James came up behind her, his good arm sliding around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. I've lived here 5 years. Never had anyone over. Not once. Why not? Because I didn't want anyone to see how empty it was. She turned in his arms. It doesn't have to be empty anymore. Are you saying you want to stay? I'm saying I don't want to leave. He kissed her forehead. Her cheeks. Her lips. Slow and careful, like he was afraid she might disappear. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. I need you to understand something. If you stay, if we do this, there's no going back. The organization will know. My enemies will know. You'll be a target. Always. I was already a target. I've been processing your invoices for 11 months. If anyone looked close enough, they'd figure out I know too much. That's different. How? Because now I care what happens to you. That makes you leverage. That makes you vulnerable. Lena put her hand on his face. Made him look at her. Then we'll be vulnerable together. And we'll watch each other's backs. And we'll figure it out. Because I didn't survive 2 days in the woods with you to walk away now. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, and this time it wasn't careful. It was desperate and real and full of everything they'd both been holding back for 11 months. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, and James was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Stay, he said. I'm not going anywhere. 3 months later, Lena moved into the penthouse officially. Her things mixed with his, books on the empty shelves, photos on the walls, plants on the windowsills. The apartment stopped being empty. Started being a home. She quit processing invoices and started handling strategy. James taught her the business, the real business, and she learned fast. Turned out she had a talent for seeing patterns, for predicting problems before they happened, for reading people the way James did. The organization noticed. Started calling her by name instead of the assistant. Started treating her like she belonged. The Choi Syndicate made 2 more attempts. Both failed. James and Lena moved through the city like they'd been doing this together for years instead of months. Partners in every sense of the word. When he had meetings, she sat beside him. When decisions needed to be made, they made them together. When threats emerged, they faced them side by side. 6 months after the crash, James took her to a restaurant on the waterfront. Private room. View of the Sound. He was wearing a suit, she was in a dress, and halfway through dinner he reached across the table and took her hand. I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It's not. At least I hope it's not. He took a breath. I'm getting out. Lena stared. Out of what? The organization. All of it. I've been moving assets, restructuring operations, setting up succession. Eric's taking over the Seattle territory. I'm done. James. I spent 10 years building something I never wanted. Doing things I'm not proud of. Becoming someone I didn't recognize. And then you walked into my life and reminded me that normal exists. That there's a world outside of this. That I could choose differently. He squeezed her hand. So I'm choosing. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing a life where we're not constantly looking over our shoulders. Where we can build something real. What will you do? I don't know yet. Maybe consulting. Maybe something completely different. I've got enough money to figure it out. He smiled. We've got enough money to figure it out. We? If you want. If you'll stay. Lena felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. You're really doing this? You're really walking away? I am. For you. For us. For the chance to wake up every morning without wondering if today's the day everything falls apart. She got up from her chair, moved around the table, and kissed him. Long and deep and full of everything she couldn't put into words. When she pulled back she was crying and smiling at the same time. Yes. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Opened it. Inside was a ring, simple and perfect, a single diamond on a platinum band. Then I have one more question. James. Marry me. Not because you work for me or because we survived something impossible. Marry me because you make me want to be better. Because you see me, all of me, and you stayed anyway. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Lena looked at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. We've only been together 6 months. I know. People will say we're moving too fast. Let them. Your mother's going to think I'm after your money. My mother's going to love you. She already does. I took you to meet her last month, remember? That was terrifying. She made you her famous dumplings. That means she approves. Lena laughed through the tears. Looked at this man who'd gone from her cold boss to the person she couldn't imagine living without. Thought about everything they'd been through. The crash. The woods. The gun. The betrayal. The building of something new. And she realized that 6 months or 6 years, it didn't matter. When you know, you know. Yes, she said. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger, pulled her into his lap, and kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world. Outside the window, the sun set over Puget Sound, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside, 2 people who'd survived the impossible held each other and planned a future that neither of them had thought possible 6 months ago. 1 year later they got married in a small ceremony on San Juan Island. Just family and a handful of close friends. Eric was the best man. James's mother cried happy tears. Lena's mom, healthy now that the medical bills were paid, gave a speech about how her daughter had always been stubborn and how she was glad that stubbornness had finally paid off. They bought a house on Bainbridge Island. Nothing flashy. Just a cottage with a view of the water and enough land for a garden. James learned to cook. Lena learned to sail. They adopted a dog, a rescue mutt who was scared of everything until he wasn't anymore. Named him Lucky. Some mornings Lena woke up and couldn't believe this was her life. That the cold boss who'd never said thank you was now the man sleeping beside her, his arm draped over her waist, his breathing even and peaceful. That the criminal enterprise she'd stumbled into had led her here, to this quiet life, to this home they'd built together. James started a legitimate consulting firm. Used his logistics expertise to help companies streamline their supply chains. Turned out he was just as good at legal operations as he'd been at illegal ones. Lena handled the business side, the strategy and planning, and together they built something they could be proud of. 2 years after the crash, they stood on their porch watching the sunset over the water. Lucky at their feet. James's arm around her shoulders. Lena's hand on her barely visible baby bump. You know what I was thinking about today, she said. What? That car crash. How if those men hadn't shot at us, if we hadn't gone off that road, if we hadn't ended up stranded in the woods, we'd probably never have had this. You think we needed to almost die to figure it out? Maybe. You were pretty committed to the cold boss thing. I was protecting you. I know that now. He turned her to face him. For what it's worth, I don't think I'd change anything. Not the crash, not the woods, not the getting shot. Because all of it led here. To you. To this. Even the part where I almost left you to die. Even that. Although for the record, I knew you wouldn't. How? Because I saw the way you looked at me when you were bandaging my shoulder. Like you were trying to figure me out. Like I was a puzzle you couldn't quite solve. Nobody walks away from an unsolved puzzle. It's not in your nature. Lena laughed. So you're saying I stayed because I'm nosy? I'm saying you stayed because you're you. And I'm the luckiest man alive that you did. She kissed him as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting their little piece of the world in gold. Behind them, the house waited, warm and full of life. Ahead of them, a future neither had planned but both had chosen. And between them, a love that had been forged in fire and blood and survived everything the world had thrown at it. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes the people we think we hate are the ones we're meant to love. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what we've been looking for all along. If this story touched you, if it made you believe in second chances and unlikely love and the power of choosing differently, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change your path. Comment below if you've ever had a moment that changed everything, if you've ever surprised yourself with your own strength, if you've ever found love in the last place you expected. And remember that life doesn't always go according to plan, but sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be.